Well, Hindus do have land, not only in India, but also in America, in England, and so on. Whatever they control is Hindu. So you can say, Hindus have something to call their own, only it is not a nation, it's not a state. That's one element, though of course I admit, to some extent you are dependent on the state you live in. And your control over territories, over societies, over people is very much limited by the laws that state imposes. The problem is not that India is pluralistic. The problem is that these Middle Eastern countries are not. So it is they who should change. It's not you who should adopt their paradigm, it's they who should adopt your paradigm. Now, you can wish that, you cannot impose that on them. I realize that is a problem. For comparison with the West, you would have to accept that the West now too is pluralistic. Many Hindu sects flourish in America. In England, you have rival sects belonging to the Swaminarayan sect. Subsects belonging to that sect. Rival sects belonging to the Hare Krishnas, and so on. The whole commonwealth of Hindu sects, you see, is largely represented in England and in America. And, so therefore, you see, this pluralism is a paradigm that is doing fairly well in the world. Even in China, there is more and more room for religions. Less for Christianity and Islam right now. Communism is a bit vigilant against that. But for Buddhism is entirely restored. So in the Muslim countries, this remains a thing to be done. I agree. And the picture is not very good. You see these dictators like Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi and so on, they kept Muslim intolerance in check. And they protected the religious minorities. So it's not a very nice situation if you need a dictatorship for that. But, okay, this is how it functioned. And the Western interventions there have done no good. So we really have a big problem on our hands there with the treatment of the minorities in the Middle East. But then, that is just a challenge to accept. That is something we should work on. You can't have everything at once. But I don't think it is a reason for doing the reverse in the case of India, namely by adopting the Middle Eastern paradigm. That should certainly not be done. You see, the guideline here should not be the nationalist ideal, which is only a century old. The guideline should be the Hindu ideal. How did ancient Hindu states deal with this? You see, and they did not impose one religion. You see, sometimes the ruler was in favor of the Buddha or in favor of Shiva and so on, and specifically patronized temples belonging to that particular sect. But nevertheless, all sects were allowed, and were patronized to some extent. So in this case, you see, in India, you do have a problem with Christianity and Islam. Two religions that falsely claim to be minorities. What they are is the local Indian chapter of an international, a very powerful and very well-funded international movement. There are many untold millions of dollars that enter India to serve the Christian cause or the Islamic cause. There is a little bit of Hindu money that flows back to Hindu organizations here. But first of all, that comes from people born in India, who happen to now live outside of India. And secondly, it is very small fry compared to what Christians and Muslims can muster. And so they are not minorities, they are, local stores belonging to a big chain of stores internationally. So that's, you should be aware of what you're dealing with. I agree. However, the solution is not to suppress Christianity or Islam. The solution is to do better. First of all, you have to understand them. This is the very first thing. I personally don't believe that Muhammad heard the voice of God, that he had revelations. No, but I'm not going to tell Muslims, hey man, this Muhammad was a funny hearer of voices. The first thing to understand, is your own people have to interiorize this. They have to understand, Muhammad was a different sort of person than our own swamis, than our own monks who are sitting in caves and meditating and so on. They are doing something wholesome, something beneficial, something spiritual. The hearing of voices is a disease symptom. And that is what Islam is based on. That's what I personally believe. No, I'm not going to trouble Muslims with this unless they really ask for it. But I do want to trouble the unbelievers with that. Because you see, many unbelievers, and especially Hindus, have a very naive attitude about it and idealize Muhammad or idealize Jesus. But Jesus especially. You see, with Muhammad, many Hindus have a hostile attitude because of what Muslims have done. You see, after some terrorist attack by Pakistanis, immediately you see there is a rise in Hindu consciousness among Hindus and a depreciation of Islam. With Christianity is different. You see, Christianity is associated with the modern nations, where America still happens to be largely Christian. And so it is associated with consumerism and so on. Like, for example, in the northeast of India, there are modern hospitals, but there are also traditional healers. And, they don't use modern medicine, but they vaguely know of Western medicine, and they call it Jesus medicine. Why? Because the hospitals in their area are Christian hospitals. And so they think that modern medicine is something that goes with Jesus. Now, in fact, Jesus was doing precisely the same medicine that those shamans now in Mizoram and so on are doing. Jesus was an exorcist. He was driving out spirits. He thought diseases were caused by spirits and that you could cure a disease by driving out spirits. The gospel says it a number of times. So, you see, Jesus is now in India getting a very, very positive press. He's being idealized far beyond what he really was. And so the first thing to do is to inform Hindus. You should not trouble your Christian neighbor. Hey, I found out something very negative about Christianity. No, you see, if the Christian tries to convert you and comes to advertise Christ, hey, Christ was great, come to Christ, then you may reply, hey, I know something else about Christ. But otherwise, you see, the thing to do, first of all, is to inform Hindus. So, you see, that's certainly not everything that, you should keep in mind. But, those are a few things to keep in mind when dealing with the challenge of Christianity or Islam.